Hi, welcome to my channel. I have a new story for you today.
Oh, look at your little nest egg, Chloe said, waving my bank statements in the air like a trophy. Thanks for the rainy day fund. My son Julian sat right next to her, staring at nothing and saying absolutely nothing. I reached out and calmly took the papers from her hand. I set my teacup down, gave her a thin smile, and made a silent vow. As of today, the free trial for my life is officially expired. Look at these savings. Thanks for the backup. My daughter-in-law Chloe checked, fluttering my bank statements in her face. She was standing in the middle of my living room with a look of pure triumph. Julian was slumped on his seat. He was staring at his shoes as if the rug's pattern had suddenly become the most fascinating thing. I'd only left the papers on the dining table for a second while I went to the kitchen to make some tea. Chloe had pounced. She and Julian had been living in the upstairs suite of my house for 2 years. At first, it was supposed to be a temporary setting, just a way for them to save up for a down payment on a place of their own. But months had bled into years, and Chloe's sense of entitlement had grown by the day. She already treated my house like it was her due, and my savings like her personal line of credit. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply set the teapot down, walked over to her, and firmly took the papers from her. This is my private fund, I said. My voice held instead. Chloe rolled her eyes. Don't get all worked up. We're family. Julian and I want to be all the way upstairs back. And your money is perfect. I mean, it's not like we need much help. Julian gave a weak nod without even looking at me. I didn't feel right. I felt cold. Icy cold. For months. I'd swallowed little disrespect. I'd done their laundry, bought their groceries, and quietly covered every utility bill for the whole house. I thought I was helping my son, but this wasn't help anymore. This was a hostile takeover of my own home. I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. The tea's getting cold, was all I said. I turned around, walked into my home office, and locked the door. There was no point in arguing. Logic was wasted on Chloe, and Julian would just defend her to avoid a fight. I sat at my desk and opened the top drawer. Inside was a heavy ring of spare keys for every single room in this house. If they thought they had full access to my life, they were dead wrong. The era of sharing was officially over. The next morning started early. By the time Chloe came downstairs, around 9:00, I was already dressed and finished with my coffee. I heard the familiar rattle of her plastic laundry basket. She was headed for the basement where my high-end washer and dryer lived. Pair of machines I'd paid for, that she had treated as her own for 2 years. A few seconds later, I heard her rattling the basement door. Then came the frantic pounding. Mora. The door is stuck, she yelled down there. Gone. I set my newspaper aside and stepped into the hallway. It's not stuck. Fluid. It's My rules. I need my privacy. The conversation is over. I didn't wait for a rebuttal. I grabbed my purse, opened the front door, and stepped out into the crisp morning air. I left them standing there in the hallway surrounded by their own confusion. I hadn't made any accusations or raised my voice. I had simply drawn a line. A very real physical line made of wood. It felt surprisingly good. The first step was taken. 3 days in deep, icy silence. Chloe ignored me with a dramatic flare. While Julian gave me those sad puppy looks every time we crossed paths. On Wednesday afternoon, Phase 2 went into effect. Up until now, I'd been the one footing the bill for the massive weekly grocery haul. The big French door fridge in my kitchen was always stocked to the brim, mostly with the expensive organic produce and specialty deli items Chloe put on the list. This time, I only shopped for myself. A few bagels, some cheese vegetables, and a nice bottle of wine. I left the rest of the fridge pointedly empty. When Chloe got home from work, I heard her march straight into the kitchen. The fridge door swung open. Total silence. 2 minutes later, she was standing in my living room doorway. Mora, where's the food? Did you forget to shop? We have friends coming over tonight. I looked up from my book and leisurely marked my page. I didn't forget. I just bought what I needed. Chloe crossed her arms, her nails digging into her sleeves. And what are Julian and I supposed to eat? What about dinner for our friends? That's for you to figure out. I said easily. Since you view my savings as your rainy day fund, I figured it was time you started handling your own daily expenses. My money is staying in my account from now on. You can't do that. We don't pay rent here because we're supposed to be saving for our future. She snapped, her voice hitting a shrill note. I closed my book and set it on the side table. Exactly. You don't pay rent. You don't pay for it, but as of today, you pay for your own food. Safeway is only 10 minutes away. I stood up, smoothed out my sweat, and walked past her into the kitchen. I grabbed an apple from my small fruit bowl and took a loud, satisfying crunch. The sound of the front door slamming behind Chloe a moment later was pure music to my ears. Friday morning. I was woken up by loud voices outside my kitchen window. I pulled the curtain back and saw a white van idling in the driveway. 2 guys in work gear were unloading heavy toolboxes. Chloe was out in the garden gesturing wildly and pointing at the rose bushes. She was loudly explaining to the men where the new cedar deck was supposed to go. She hadn't even had the decency to ask me. She just assumed I'd pay for it and keep my mouth shut, like I always did. I calmly threw on a cardigan, stepped into my shoes, and headed out the back door. Morning. Guys, I said politely to the contractors. They nodded back. Chloe turned around, her expression hardening instantly. Mora, go back inside. We're just going over the dimensions for the new seating area. It's going to look great. I ignored her entirely and looked at the foreman. I'm sorry for the confusion. Gentlemen, but there won't be any construction on this property today. I am the sole owner of this home, and I haven't authorized any work. The man scratched his head, looking confused. But the lady here said that financing was all set, and we should start today. The lady was mistaken. I said, my voice firm and quiet. There will be no deck. Please pack up your tools. I'd hate for you to waste any more of your time. Chloe took a threatening step toward me. Julian and I want to actually use this yard. You just sit inside all day anyway. I didn't even look at her as the contractors started loading their gear back into the van. They clearly wanted no part of a family feud. My yard. My roses. I said simply, if you want a deck, you'll have to buy a house to put it on. I waited until the van pulled out of the driveway. Then I carefully locked the garden gate Before I could say a word, Chloe flew down the stairs. "Mom, Dad, come on in," she shouted, pushing past me. She led them straight into my living room like she owned the place. "Have a seat. I'm sure Maura will get some coffee started for us," Chloe said, looking at me expectantly. In the old days, I would have scurried into the kitchen, pulled out the good china, and played the perfect hostess just to keep the peace. Those days were over. I stayed in the hallway and pulled my elegant gray wool coat off the rack. "I'm sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Miller," I said, kind but firm. Chloe didn't mention she was hosting guests today. I actually already have plans for the afternoon. I buttoned my coat and grabbed my handbag. Chloe's jaw literally dropped. "Maura, you can't just leave. We need the espresso machine and the large mugs. Where are you even going?" I gave a soft smile. "It's my Sunday off. The espresso machine in my kitchen is private now. But you're more than welcome to boil some water on the stove upstairs. Feel free to make yourselves comfortable in the hallway or in your suite." I turned back to her bewildered parents. "Have a lovely afternoon." With that, I walked out the front door and pulled it shut behind me. I didn't actually have a single plan, but a walk through the park in the sunshine sounded like heaven. I knew they'd be sitting in my living room, annoyed with no coffee, no fancy dishes, and no mother-in-law to wait on them. I took a deep breath. The autumn air was crisp. I felt lighter than I had in years. Monday brought the next logical step. I had spent the weekend going through my filing cabinets. Up until now, I'd been paying every single bill. Electricity, water, gas, for the whole house. Julian and Chloe had taken it for granted while keeping their floor at 72 degrees and taking 2 0-minute showers. I sat at the kitchen table and drew up a detailed, fair breakdown of the costs, since the upstairs unit had its own sub-meters. The math was incredibly simple. I wrote it all out on a clean sheet of paper. That evening, I knocked on their door upstairs. Julian opened it looking exhausted. "Hey, Mom, what's up?" he asked. I handed him the paper. "This is your monthly bill for utilities. Since you're both working full-time and living your own lives, it's only fair you carry your own weight. Please have the transfer in my account by the 5th of every month." Chloe appeared behind him and snatched the paper. Her eyes bugged out at the total. $300. "This is a scam. You're trying to kick us out of our own home. This isn't your home." "Chloe," I said in a calm, flat voice, "it's my home. You are guests living here for free. I'm not even charging you rent, just the actual cost of what you consume. If it's too expensive, you should turn down the heat or find an apartment that fits your budget better." Julian tried to play peacemaker, but, "Mom, can't we talk about this? The money is a little tight right now." "Is a little tight." I looked my son in the eye. "You're a grown man. Julian, you have a good job. It is no longer my responsibility to subsidize your lifestyle. The choice is yours." I turned and walked back downstairs. No more debating, more debating. I hadn't made any legal threats. I just introduced them to the reality of being an adult. The cold water of the real world was going to hit them very soon. Wednesday morning, a large delivery truck pulled up at the curb. 2 burly guys hopped out and opened the back. They started sliding out a massive, modern, navy blue velvet sectional. I stood in the doorway and knew exactly what was happening. Chloe had mentioned several times that my classic leather sofa was too old-fashioned. She had obviously decided to replace it on her own. Assuming I'd just roll over once it was in the room, Chloe came racing down the stairs with a triumphant grin. "Surprise, I thought we'd spruce up the living room. You can just put that old leather thing out on the curb for the trash." She tried to push past me to show the movers where to go. I planted myself firmly in the doorframe. flicker of realization in his eyes. He knew I was right. He had been riding my coattails to avoid dealing with his wife's demands. Mom. This is a lie.